Hey Carol, how are you? Nice of you
Hi.
to join in on this Zoom chat. You doing all right?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Well, thank you for being willing to share a bit of your story. So tell us from the start. You're a local girl here. Tell us a little bit about your background, some of your beliefs growing up.
Yeah, so I think I had quite a typical childhood growing up in Ireland. I grew up in a Catholic family, grew up going to Mass every week. Not something I particularly enjoyed doing growing up. I did believe in God, but it didn't have any real impact on my day to day life. I would go to Mass on a Sunday, and that's the only really time I would think about it. The rest of my week was just about me and what I wanted to do.
And so then something happens. God meant a little bit more to you. What happens so that you eventually came to know Jesus?
The first time that I ever met a Christian, someone who was a follower of Jesus, was my next door neighbors. There was a couple that lived next door to me, Tommy and Teresa, who were really good friends of my family. They're great friends with my parents. They're like second parents to me. They were Christians, and they used to invite me to their youth group that they ran for their church. And I never really wanted to go. I didn't really have an interest in going. But I did go. I started going because there was a boy that went that I fancied, and that's the only reason I really wanted to go. I didn't really want to learn about God or about Jesus. So I went for a while, but I stopped going because I stopped liking that guy. So there was no reason for me to keep going. And it wasn't until much later on, until I was about 19 or 20, that I actually started having more of an interest. And I think a big part of that was because when I was 19, I was diagnosed with depression. And looking back, I think that the depression kind of started quite early in my teens. So it was quite a prevalent part of my teen years. So experiencing that in a pivotal time of your life, where you're kind of figuring out what life is and who you are, it kind of really made me think about what life is. What's the point of life, and is there hope? Where is God in it? Because when you're struggling with something like depression, I think God comes into it more. You wonder, where is He? Why does He allow suffering? Stuff like that.
So depression actually led to a lot of questions. How did those questions then get answered?
So the couple that lived next door to me growing up, they moved to Wexford, and so they actually, after I'd been diagnosed with depression, I had to drop out of college, and I had lost my job. So I was in kind of this time in my life where I wasn't doing anything or able to do much. And they knew that I was not working or going to school. So they asked if I wanted to help out at their church's summer camp. And I was a bit apprehensive because I'd never been involved with anything to do with the church before. And I knew I would have to go to their church service, which I kind of didn't want to do. But I love working with kids, and they knew that about me. So I went, and I went to church. It was my first experience with a Christian church, and it blew me away because there was a group of people who, on the outside, looked like they have nothing in common. All these people from different walks of life and different countries, and yet they were so loving. They really, really cared about each other, and they really cared about other people. Um, and also, another thing that I had never seen before was someone teaching from the Bible, in a way that I could understand it. Because I had, heard verses from the Bible being read before, but I had never heard them being explained in a way that someone like me, who had never opened the Bible before, could actually understand what was being said. So that really intrigued me because, as someone who believed that God existed, um, and wanted to know more, and was experiencing depression and having all these questions. It really made me want to know more, because I thought, well, if I believe in God, I should probably figure out who he is and what he's trying to say. And if the Bible is his word, then I should probably read it and investigate it. So I did. The couple, Tommy and Teresa, they invited me to come down to their church once a month to go to an art group and to go to church with them. And I started going. So I would travel down once a month for a weekend, and I loved talking to them and asking them questions, and they always had an answer. Whereas if I asked anyone else, they never could answer it. And they would always go to the Bible. They would open the Bible and point me to it and say, this is why God says this about this particular topic. So I was learning a lot, and I was starting to read the Bible for myself, and investigating who Jesus was and learning about why he came. And I think it was just over time learning about that kind of led to me understanding it fully.
So what did you come to understand more then whilst reading the Bible and being taught from your friends?
It was understanding that Jesus was the Son of God, that he was sent to earth to pay for my sin. And at that time, I was experiencing great guilt. I really had become aware of my own sin for various reasons. I think it was God's Spirit working in me at the time, showing me that I needed him. And I think I really saw my own sin, and it scared me, because I knew that if I had to stand before God, I knew that I wouldn't be able to stand before him, because I knew that I was guilty, and I knew that I had wronged him in so many ways. But with that came a greater realization of God's grace, and knowing that his grace completely covered my sin, that Jesus' death paid for my sin completely, and all of my sin past and future, and that I could be his child, that I could have a real relationship with him, and that could never be taken away from me. And that weight that I felt, the weight of my sin and the weight of guilt, just went away, because I knew that I was free from it.
You grasped that your sin could be completely taken away. And was there something you had to do that, contribute to that?
No, I think the guilt that I was feeling, I knew that there was so many things that I had done wrong, so many things. And I also realized that there was nothing that I could do to make it right either. The only thing that I could do was trust that God had already done it for me. I knew that Jesus had died. I had heard that my whole life. But knowing that his death was for me, and knowing that I didn't have to give anything or contribute anything for him to do that for me, it was already done, it was an amazing realization for me.
So you trusted in Jesus, you knew all your guilt was taken away, forgiven. But did that lead to any change? What sort of changes then happened?
The way I lived my life before was not a Christian life. I lived for myself. I did what I wanted to do. I didn't care about God. But now I did, and I knew that was going to have to change. And from the moment I went home, my relationships changed with people, with my friends, with my family. My family were quite worried, actually. They thought that I had been brainwashed. They weren't really happy with what was going on. My relationship with them changed. My friends didn't really want much to do with me anymore. So I was actually quite alone for the first few months of becoming a Christian.
Some of this hasn't been easy. You've had difficulties and how it was perceived and accepted at the beginning. what is some of the best things about becoming a Christian?
Well, I think even in experiencing those things, the hard things, it really solidified in me the realization of what it meant to be a follower of Jesus, that it was worth following him no matter what happened. Because in following him, we know that there's hope, and there's hope of an eternal future. And I think even with what's going on in the world at the moment, there's so much fear and anxiety and worry, and people are so unsure about the future. But as a Christian, I don't have to be afraid of those things. I don't have to be afraid of sickness or broken relationships with people, or my finances, as hard as those things are to deal with. But knowing that I have a future hope, knowing that a future hope, a future with Jesus for eternity is what's awaiting me. So there's nothing that I would have to be worried about or be anxious about. And even the here and now, life has a much greater meaning. When I was struggling with depression, it came with those questions of what is the point of life? Is life even worth living? But now I know that life has a greater meaning here and now, because living as a follower of Jesus, my life is lived to know him and to have a real relationship with him here and now, and so that I can tell other people about him, because if Jesus is real, and if Jesus is who he says he is, and we can have eternal hope with him, why would I not want to tell people about him? Another wonderful thing about being a Christian is having relationships with other Christians. And something that is different about relationships between Christians is that we have this unity that you don't have with others. We have the unity of the Spirit of God in all of us, and we are united. And you can walk into a church and think, what on earth do any of these people have in common? And they're also different. But the thing we have in common is Jesus. And I remember my sister asking me once, she said, the community you have in your church is amazing. I'd love to have that, but without the Jesus part. And I said, well, unfortunately, that's not possible, because the reason we have this community is because of Jesus. And it's something so unique to Christianity, is this unity within the body of Christ, within the church.
That's great. Carol, is there anything else that you'd like to just pass on to us?
Yeah, I think what I'd like to say to anyone who's listening to this is that if you have these big questions about life and about God and about meaning, I would really recommend to actually reading the Bible for yourself, because we're told so many things about God and about who God is, but it's so important to actually investigate it yourself. Read God's word and read about what he says about himself, because you will learn about who you are and about who God is by reading his word. And the most important thing that you could ever do in this life is know God in a personal way and have a real relationship with him.
Carol, thanks very much for sharing your story and what God has done in your life. And if anybody else does want to get a Bible, if you want a Bible, or if you want to study the Bible in some of the courses that we run, do get in touch. But thank you, Carol. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.